feel like in general, just on every other art community space I've been on, there's at least some group of people that is always dogging on specific OC related traits, tropes, and whatever. So I've already done a previous video on this, but I wanted to do another one on just more OC things that I really like, posts, generic descriptors, even down to just very specific stuff that I really like to see when it comes to OCs to kind of combat this negative mindset. As always, I love to discuss, and if you have any, I'd love to hear them just in the comment section and, hear what you guys like to see in OCs. But yeah, getting into the list. This first one is really funky character shapes, and I'm talking just beyond the average triangle, circle, square. I love seeing exaggerated features on OCs, and I've talked about that before. But when OCs are insanely top heavy or have in general different types of statures, it's so cool. Honestly, I think a lot of my characters really lack generic shapes in their designs, and I really want to get into designing them with those fundamentals in mind. But whenever I see them, it's just so cool. I personally, again, really love sharper characters. I love seeing characters that are more rounded too. And I love when it actually subverts a bunch of tropes when maybe a more sharper character is generally more soft, or when the rounder character is actually more assertive or blunt. Because it's just a fun subversion. It's really, really simple, but it's such a difference. Okay, moving on. I really do love tropey archetype characters. I don't care how many times some generic trope is done or a type of character is repeated over and over again. I love to see them every time. And I don't think every OC needs to be entirely complex in its design or backstory or whatever for it to be fun and want to see more of that character. And this goes for any type of trope. Grumpy Sunshine, those character dynamics, I'll eat them up every time. And I just think they're really neat. I get why people might be tired of the same 3 different types of dynamics being repeated over and over again. I don't know, but for me it's just very comforting because it's such a familiar idea. And I guess that's why I like this type of thing in particular. Moving on to generic backstories, because I've seen so many people specifically dog on generic backstories. And I don't know, I don't get the hate because, I do think stories are going to be retold over and over again, and it doesn't always have to be unique, especially if it's the individual's own character. It doesn't even have to subvert the trope for me to like it. Yeah, tell me about your lab OC and how they progressed. Or, the generic, godly OCs, and again, I don't see the hate. I will die on this hill for all of those generic backstories, no matter how repeated they are, because again, I just think it's comforting for the same way as the previous one I discussed, where it's very familiar, and again, it still can be an interesting trope if specific concepts are involved in them. I don't think every story has to be something entirely brand new to be interesting. This next one. I really love passion project OCs, or just long-term OCs in general. I think this is coming from a place of experience in my case, because I have OCs that have lasted me basically for over 5 years at this point, and they're very, very important to me and special to my heart, and I've basically evolved these OCs and had them grow alongside me. So I have a place in my heart for every OC that has been put through such long periods of time of changing and rearranging, and people who are very attached to their OCs and seeing how they feel about them. I don't know, it makes me feel all warm too, because OCs are just such a special thing, and seeing someone as devoted to their own characters as myself makes me feel really happy. So I adore those. And yeah, I've already talked a million times about how much I love gimmick OCs and joke OCs, and I've done, again, previous videos on all of those, but they'll never not be something that I absolutely love to see, because there are some that genuinely get a giggle out of me. I've already talked about Hugh, I don't know if I've talked about Frank, okay? But there's just something so special in having a character that's not really trying to be anything entirely multifaceted in terms of personality or backstory or whatever. Some people are just simple, and I think that gimmick OCs are a reflection of that. And And I especially love when these gimmicks and bits are really played out long term and when they're just really baked into the character. Again, I do think you can make gimmick OCs and joke OCs have heavy backstories or give them dimension later on, and I talked about giving those types of characters dimension and how that can be fun too. But, you know, even just as a surface level thing, I think they're so awesome and I will love them forever. Moving on. Time period heavy original characters. I know I need to elaborate on what I mean here, but I think it's really cool when like an original character or original story is placed in a specific time period and additional historical context from that period is put into the characters or put into the story and adds a layer of plot. Because again, I think a lot of people do historical OCs or just like OCs that are based in a specific time frame, and usually I notice that that's for aesthetics, which is completely fine, and I think that's really cool. But I love seeing how the mindsets, the culture of that time reflects these characters and how it can directly impact them, because I just think that's really cool. I don't see it as often as, you know, the same generic OCs, and again, I love those too, but I think there's something untapped here when it comes to characters that have to really work around the time that they are stuck in and how different it is from modern time. I don't know, I just think history is really cool in general. I really do love seeing characters who have that sort of depth and dimension to them. Okay, this one is also pretty similar to the period heavy OCs, but I don't think it has a specific time that it has to be in to be interesting. And that's culture-based OCs, because there are so many interesting cultures that I think can make for such cool OCs, like mythology, cultural practices. This doesn't have to be constrained to a time period, it can just be how a modern character interacts with their culture in general. I think coming from, again, personal example, a lot of my characters are Filipino. I include a lot of Pinoy characters in my stories as just a default because I love representing my culture, and I think it's really cool when others do that too because it's such an unused thing. So, you know, culture and background are also incredibly important. These next two are not necessarily tropes or like specific things, but posts that I really love to see that people make of their original characters. First one is like character turnarounds or like face charts, because I don't know, I love seeing people's distinct facial side profiles that they give their OCs, and when they do full turnarounds, ooh, so good. Not the AI ones, I do need to clarify, but just in general, the way that they do full character turnarounds or like showing the full planes of the face. I think it's really cool. And, you know, if I had the actual experience to animate that, trust I would do it in a second. And I don't know, I don't see a lot of these, but I would love to see more. Moving on to OC progression posts, and I talk about these a lot too. I think this goes hand in hand with passion project or long-term OCs like I talked about before. But seeing, you know, those silly posts that are like, oh, my character talking to their first iteration and it's like completely different. It's just so fun. Like, yes, tell me about how your Warrior Cats OC is now like an old man bum. I would love to hear about that. And I think it just kind of shows, again, very personal things about the original creator and the periods of time that they experienced when, you know, eventually altering this character. Can also just be your character growing up. I talked about that before. Okay, but I love seeing them grow up, or how they change over time. I think that's so cool. And, you know, if you have any OC related progression posts that you would like to show me, you know, my comments are open for a reason. But yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to cover today. If you have any OC tropes or traits that you really love to see, I'd love to hear about them and discuss them. I think just talking positively about OC related things can really make a difference instead of bashing each other for OC related concepts and everything. So yeah, if you've not seen my previous video, it was a yap session 100%, but I'll also have it linked in the description if you want to check that one out. That should be everything. Bye!